we need to talk about counterarguments. There are some especially sticky and unhelpful ideas that writers tend to pick up in classes. Things like the idea that emotions are always and only used for underhanded manipulation, that papers should start with cheap and flashy hooks, and that every paper should include a counterargument. But of course, emotions are valid and important parts of any persuasive effort, and hooks are usually cheap caricatures of sentences, when what would really hook a reader is to explain what's at stake in an argument. When it comes to including a counterargument in your paper, though, it can be a really useful and effective strategy, but more often than not, it happens in such a clumsy way that it actually ends up doing more harm than good. And we don't want that, so let's talk about how counterarguments can go wrong and how to make sure that you never do. I suppose we should start by defining what we mean when we're talking about counterarguments. When you include a counterargument in your paper, you're including a perspective or opinion that is opposed to your own. So if you were to write a paper about why pineapple belongs on pizza, you might include a counterargument or the opposing viewpoint that pineapple does not under any circumstance belong on a pizza. And most often when I hear new writers say that we should be including counterarguments in our writing, they say it's because it helps us to appear unbiased. And that's because, of course, bias is bad, but we've talked before about how bias and opinion are not the same thing. You can't persuade anyone of anything without having an opinion, and having an opinion does not mean that you have a bias. Pure neutrality is never persuasive because it doesn't seek to motivate somebody to move in one direction or another. You just can't tell someone that there's a better way to do something without thinking that there is, in fact, a better way to do something. I mean, just imagine. Your Honor, my client is clearly innocent of any wrongdoing, but the opposition did make some good points, and I don't want to look biased, so I guess we should just let the jury make up their own mind. My fellow residents of this country, I can assure you that thanks to my vision for our future, I'm the best candidate to represent you in our governing body. At the same time, though, my opponent has some pretty compelling and admirable ideas. They could even be better than me. I mean, who can say? When your goal is to persuade, just dropping an opposing argument into your work is like putting a time bomb in your paper and setting it to explode. The very worst thing, though, is that a lot of writers put that unopposed counter-argument right at the end of their paper. So after they've spent some pages outlining their own position on an issue, they give their reader a handy list of all the reasons that their own argument isn't that great. So well done. With your clumsy neutrality, you've just pushed your readers to the other side. A less common motive, but one that can be just as counterproductive, is to include counter-arguments in order to show how comprehensive a reader's knowledge is. In these cases, not only do they provide an opposing perspective, but they include all alternative perspectives. In short, I know that you'd be doing the right thing by voting for me. But you could also vote for Jerry, or Terry, or Larry, or Sherry, or Mary, or Perry. In these cases, the heap of alternative arguments will obscure the argument that the writer is actually trying to make. The desire to avoid bias and to show your readers that you've done your homework are both important and worthwhile desires. You should show your readers that you're not biased and that you have done your homework. But what you should not do is put unopposed counter-arguments into your paper so that they can derail your whole argument and show your readers that your position isn't that good. So how do we fix it? The simple, straightforward solution is to make sure that whenever you do include a counter-argument, you respond to it. Show your readers its limitations. Explain to them why you don't agree with it and why they shouldn't either. Well, won't that just reinforce a bias? No, because remember, an opinion is not a bias. You have to have an opinion to make an argument, and you have to respond to other arguments in order to make an effective argument. You would be biased if you just dismissed every other possible argument by saying, my position is obviously correct and anyone who disagrees with me is a stinky dingus. That sounds like bias. But outlining and responding to an opposing argument can actually reinforce your lack of a bias. If you can show your readers that you understand an opposing viewpoint and still disagree with it, you'll show them that you've thought carefully about the topic at hand. In other words, it shows your readers that your opinion is not just something that you're holding on to no matter what. And the same goes for including counter-arguments to show your readers that you've done your homework. You want to show your readers that you've thought carefully and deeply about multiple perspectives as you formed your own opinion. That shows that you're not just sticking with the first thing you thought of. When you respond to opposing arguments, you actually show your readers that you're open-minded and thoughtful because you're able to consider other perspectives and articulate why you don't agree with them. So not only does it build your credibility as a writer and thinker, but it also strengthens your argument against potential attacks that may come from the other side. An attorney who defends their client by responding to the opposition's arguments is not biased, they're just doing their job and doing it well. And the same is true for a writer who responds to counter-arguments in their paper. It's all just part of the job. So don't plant a time bomb in your paper by letting those opposing arguments go unaddressed. Instead, keep them under control and show your readers why, even in light of those other perspectives, yours is still the better option. Self-destructing counter-arguments are pretty common, but happily they're also pretty easy to fix. Including counter-arguments is, in theory, a great way to strengthen your paper, but in practice they can pose grave risks if you don't respond to them properly. So please do include counter-arguments in your writing, but don't let them loose in your paper without supervision. That's the easiest way to undermine your argument and short-circuit what you're trying to accomplish. And of course, we don't want that, not any more than we want mixed metaphors. So go on and counter those counter-arguments, and you'll be writing stronger, not counter-arguments in no time at all. Thanks a bunch for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.